Welcome, everybody, to our little show where we talk about the only hockey teams that you care about. The Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames, the Vancouver Canucks, and from time to time, the Winnipeg Jets. We don't have Bob McCown, Primetime Sports, cheesy music to lead us into the show, so let's get underway. I'm Brendan Monroe, and with me tonight is Sean Miller.
Good evening, folks.
Sean's a man with the opinion. I present, he decides. Let's get right to it. Which former Atlanta-based team will struggle more this offseason, or this coming season? The Winnipeg Jets or the Calgary Flames? Sean?
Pretty easy answer, I think, here. If you look at what happened last season, I saw one team that was in the hunt right till Christmas, and then hit a few bumps in the road in the second half. They dealt with some young, upcoming players, and they're pretty strong in net. The other team, and you can probably guess who that team is, got a year older. Got a year older in every position. From the strongest players to the weakest players. They even managed to trade away one of the better players and received nothing in return except even more old players. Of course, I'm talking about the Calgary Flames. Clearly this season, the weaker of the two teams is going to be the Calgary Flames. Joe McGinley is still a world beater, but he's an aging world beater on the decline in his career. Goal scorers are especially prone to decline later in their years as goal production dries up because they just don't have that extra step to get on defensemen. And McGinley was suffering from that last year. You can see he's becoming an even more streaky player who might score 10 goals in 12 games, but then might not score again in the next 20.
Well, look at Calgary last year. They had the streak. The streak was the entire season.
Well, pretty much. Let's not forget, going to Christmas, Calgary was behind Edmonton, the 30th place team in the standings. Calgary was in 30th. Without their little miracle run towards the end when the games didn't really matter, they'd have been in dead last. They could have been in a lottery pick position.
Let's talk briefly about the other team, the Winnipeg Jets. How do you see them doing their first year back on the prairies in Winnipeg?
Well, I think they're a little bit different. I think first, once they get back into the Winnipeg arena and the reception they're going to see from the fans, playing in front of a packed building every night, I think that's really going to add some emotion to a team that was already pretty good last year. Like I said, let's not forget that they were in the playoffs Christmas. They're playing in a very weak division with really only one good team in Washington, one marginal team in Carolina. So there's definitely some points to be had in their divisional play. And, you play off some strong divisional play. You feel a little bit challenged by playing Washington. You never know.
I'm looking forward.
Andre Pavlik in net.
I'm looking forward to those Washington games. Those Washington games on Saturday night in Winnipeg will be phenomenal.
No, absolutely. And I think, hopefully they find their way to get that picture of the Queen hanging up in the rafters again. That's a classic. But I've heard they're not going to do that, unfortunately, for the old fans. But I really think that between that extra emotion, that jump in their step they're going to get all season, having a good young team of players, and the fact that they do have a rock in net leads to good things. As Colorado proved a few years ago, if you have a couple of good young players and a star goalie playing for you, you can make the playoffs. You can go from last to playoff team in one season.
Let's talk about the playoffs. We had the Vancouver Canucks on the West Coast going as far into the playoffs as you can go without coming home with the hardware, and they're a beat-up team. We saw Ryan Kessler undergo surgery. We know Mason Raymond's more than injured, and hopefully he's recovering in a healthy and timely kind of way. They're a beat-up hockey club. How long do you think it'll take for them to find their legs on the ice as they go into this season? And are they a more catchable team this season because of it?
Well, I think they absolutely are. I think the same thing goes. They took a lot of scars, physical and mental scars from what happened last year. And I think this goes to a team that was already fairly weak mentally. Roberto Luongo is going to be under the microscope this year. Every time a puck bounces in on him funny, anytime somebody shoots from behind the goal line and it takes a weird Kareem off a defenseman, the entire building is going to be looking at one person and one person only. And I think he's going to get a short leash. I don't think that bodes well for a player who's on such a lengthy long-term contract. And I think it's going to cause problems for the rest of the team, too. The Sedins repeated their typical, they're here, they're not here playoff performance of past years. They're apparently suffering from injury, but who isn't injured during the playoffs? And they say the cream rises to the top. Well, they obviously didn't rise to the top. They kind of sunk to the bottom and floundered, especially against Boston. That Marchand scene where he's punching Sedin over and over in the face in front of the net kind of showed they just had no kickback. They had no fight. And I think that's the big thing that's going to carry into the season. They've got some real demons to fight. I think the best thing that could happen to Vancouver would be that they get an early season matchup against Chicago and get a real spirited game going, because I think that's what they're going to need to wake them out of their slumber. They're going to need somebody to wake them up.
It sure seemed to happen when they were playing the San Jose Sharks, that when Ben Eager ran the Vancouver Canucks, they woke up. They showed up in that series and they basically put the Sharks to sleep after Ben Eager chased them around. So the Oilers, of course, went out and picked up Ben Eager in the offseason. Surprising how many moves the Edmonton Oilers made to get ready for this coming season. Of course, Eager, Cam Barker, the controversial Ryan Smith trade. They're a much different looking team than they were heading into the tail end of last season.
They're a much better team than they were heading into the beginning of last season. Last season, they were hovering about 500 until the injury bug, a statistic which they again led the NHL in last year, took its toll, robbing them of their best defenseman, their second best defenseman, their starting goalie, all of their best forwards, leading with a lineup that mostly resembled the Oklahoma City Barons by the midway point of the season. I think the results from there were pretty obvious. Down the middle was perhaps their greatest weakness last year. And by adding a guy like Eric Belanger, a guy who can play multiple roles, he can go up and down the lineup, he wins faceoffs, he kills penalties. He was the hardest working, award-winning player in the Phoenix Coyotes 2 seasons ago. A player who's been, appreciated in all the dressing rooms he's been. I think he's going to add a real dimension of leadership, which is really going to take some weight off the shoulders of some of the younger players up the middle. Sam Gagner is not going to win you faceoffs, and now he doesn't have to. You can throw out a Horkoff or a Belanger to take that draw, and then get him to the bench and get Gagner back out there. Same goes for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. With those two strong players down the middle, now they can give him soft minutes. They can hide him behind those guys a little bit. Make sure that he comes up for the offensive zone faceoffs, not the defensive zones. Give him a chance to flourish in an environment where, he's going to go out there and play with Hemsky. He's going to go play with Ryan Smith. He's going to play with goal scorers like Jordan Eberle and Taylor Hall. And I think that really bodes well for the future. I think the Oilers are a much better team. I mean, you look at their bottom six, where they probably were the weakest last year. A guy like Ben Eager, a guy who can skate and bring energy, they haven't had a player like that in many years. Probably since Rafi Torres' playoff run in 06, where he provided that role of a banging, hard-way 2 player who can really get under the skin of the other players. And I know that Canuck fans would like to say that Ben Eager woke them up, but I think they were just a better team in San Jose. I think he was just getting frustrated and could see the writing was on the wall. Ben Eager's had a pretty good record against the Canucks over his career, and I think he's the kind of guy that the Oilers can use to get in there, to get in on those soft players that the Canucks have on their lineup, from Bieksa to Luongo and Sedins, of course, and create something. Create some energy in the building. I think the Oilers are going to be a very, very motivated team this year. That youthful exuberation is really going to start paying off, I think, this year. You're going to see a guy like Taylor Hall, who had a really strong finish last season. He could be on pace for 35 or 40 goals easily this season if things go well.
Sean, I think you're a homer. I'm going to call you out as a homer right now, but we already knew that, and luckily we're not beholden to anyone in the corporate media. We're not beholden to anyone for a paycheck around here, so we know that you're going to talk the Oilers' book, so to speak, up and down, and
absolutely.
You know they're a playoff team in your mind. I'm a little more doubtful. Of course, here I am on the West Coast, and we talk Vancouver Canucks hockey all the time, so it's a no-brainer here that we're going all the way back to the Stanley Cup final in Vancouver. But reality, I think, will be somewhere in the middle on both of those occasions. I think Vancouver is going to have a strong season once again. They're a playoff team. We know that. They're deep enough. They have enough scoring talent. Whether they'll win the division, they're in a pretty weak division again this year, so I think the chances of them finishing top 3 in the West, pretty darn good. As you say, Edmonton, playoff team? Maybe, maybe not. They'll be improved. It's not hard to think that they will be improved over the 30th place finish last year. Unfortunately, no more first overall picks coming for the Edmonton Oilers in the next couple of years, I do not think. Are they a playoff team? Well, they'll be fighting for it. It depends how they integrate their new players into the lineup, but I think they have the chemistry potential. They have the lineup potential to be able to get themselves into the playoffs. Calgary, I agree with you off the top of the show. I don't think that they're a playoff team this year. They didn't show it last year, and those legs will not be able to carry them through a 40-game stretch like they went through last year again, unless somehow they can just play more consistent and even-paced hockey throughout the year. And lastly, the Winnipeg Jets, well, they're a feel-good story, and they're in a mediocre division, and who knows, maybe they can not only bring hockey back to Portage and Maine, but they just might bring some playoff action as well. Sean, we're just about out of time. Thank you for joining me this evening, and we look forward to bringing you next week's news from around the NHL, and more specifically from the only hockey teams that you care about, the Edmonton Oilers, Vancouver Canucks, Winnipeg Jets, and Calgary Flames. Have a great night, everybody.